welcome back to April's edition of Lifelong Learners. Last week I talked about my stuffed animals and the story behind Teddy. This week I want to dive deeper into why science has failed women and girls on the autism spectrum from my own lived experience. For more episodes of Lifelong Learners, you can go to Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and don't forget to go to YouTube and like, comment, and share my podcasts. Helps me to get my autism story out there. Also, subscribe to my channel at Lifelong Learners Podcast. Now, let's dive into how science has failed women and girls on the autism spectrum from my own lived experience. Your host, Holly Tetreault. Science has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to women and girls on the autism spectrum. When I was younger, I hid my stims from everyone. I tried so hard to fit in with other people. I've been reading a book called Off the Spectrum. This book talks about how science has failed women and girls. I want more girls to get diagnosed with autism so they can get the services they need early in life. Women and girls, including myself, tend to mask their autistic traits. I want to tell my story because it's still too common for women and girls to get an autism diagnosis later in life. Some having to wait until their 20s, 30s, and even their 50s and 60s to get a diagnosis. I was always on the outside, and it felt like I was the only one who didn't understand how to navigate this overwhelming world. Sometimes I found it hard to concentrate on my homework when there's too much going on around me. Other times I prefer to be alone because having to move from Leiden to Turner's was hard. I was still undiagnosed with autism at this time, and processing the feelings from the divorce made me hide my true self. Also, even mentioning that I was struggling in certain situations in school made me feel like an outsider. No one took me seriously when I mentioned the sensitivity to loud noise. The response I would get from the teachers would be, "Oh, you can sit in the nurse's office and eat your lunch." From that point on, I didn't even mention anything about my autism because I knew that people wouldn't take me seriously. As I got older, it became harder for me to mask on a daily basis. I tried to fly under the radar during high school, but that plan backfired. I do blame my English teacher I had either during my freshman or sophomore year of high school. I shouldn't have to go to school and be on guard in case someone says something rude about me. I never talked about this when it happened or after it happened because my past attempts of speaking up for myself always got me in trouble instead of the other person. Every day I went to school, I almost always never felt safe to talk to anyone about how I was feeling. Even if I did speak up, the school never did anything about the constant bullying. Growing up, I never remember school being a safe place for me. Now that I am researching autistic girls and bullying, one thing that is sticking out to me is the impact that it has on mental health in autistic girls. I had noticed over the years that my anxiety got higher. I was very depressed to the point where even getting up for school was a challenge. The bullying had gotten so bad that I thought there was no other way out other than trying to end my life. In the spring of 2018, it started with me looking up bad things online. Then I came off of all of my antidepressants and anti anxiety medications. I pulled a few all nighters. I was to the point where I was put on medical leave from school. At this point, I wanted it all to end because I was fed up with going to school and being bullied for who I was. This is why I became suicidal in the first place almost 8 years ago. I was trying to escape the constant verbal abuse from classmates and teachers. Every day of my life has been a constant battle of rejection and people taking advantage of me. That life I was living back then was torture. This is why science not only needs to catch up, but it needs to do more for autistic girls in public school settings. Teachers and staff need to be trained to look for signs of bullying in autistic girls. I can't say this enough. Don't pressure someone to fit in. Instead, talk about neurodiversity at school. When I went to Brattleboro Retreat after trying to end my life in 2018, I realized very quickly how uneducated the staff was to treat someone with autism. During this time, I found it hard to open up to the staff about why I wanted to end my life in 2018. Even to this day, I'm still trying to figure out why everything happened. I still believe it was connected to all the bullying I went through in school. This is another reason I went back to school because I want to advocate for women and girls on the autism spectrum. What I want to talk about comes from my own lived experiences and doing research on these topics. As I have mentioned before, I experienced many forms of bullying in school, including verbal bullying, bullying based on my disability. After all those years of teachers and staff not doing anything to make sure that I was safe at school, this also led to the trust issues that I still have with adults to this very day. I still find it hard to let people into my life after everything I went through in childhood. It's a slow process finding trust in people because that trust was broken during childhood. Most times, I felt like I was on my own back then, and I only had a couple people outside of school who I could trust. Going through bullying at a young age has made me a completely different person. I used to go about my life without worrying what other people would think of me. Now that I am a young adult, I find it harder to cope with changes in my routine. I have trust issues due to the trauma I experienced in childhood. When I talk about my experiences with autism, I want other young girls to know that they are not alone in what they are experiencing. We have an administration that is continuing to spread lies about autism. I want to focus on the fact that autistic girls are at a greater risk of being bullied than boys. For example, I was trying to mask my autistic traits so I wouldn't get bullied. I am only starting to realize now that the first time I was being bullied was in third grade at the end of recess. I never knew that someone kicking my boots was the first sign I was being bullied. I did try to tell the teacher about it, but they told me to be quiet instead. To this day, I wish the teachers were educated about autism because the bullying ruined my senior year of high school. I was very afraid to return to school, especially after my classmate bullied me about my disability. Being autistic isn't a bad thing. I am creative, smart, and I will continue to prove everyone wrong. Using my lived experiences and my stuffed animals, I will continue to get the facts about autism out there. I will never stop fighting for the autism community because we deserve love, respect, compassion, and acceptance. That's all for this week's episode of Lifelong Learners. This week, I dive deeper into how science has failed women and girls on the autism spectrum from my own lived experience. Next week, for Autism Acceptance Month, I will continue sharing my lived experiences. I want to thank Alex, GCC, and all of my fans for helping me get my autism story out there. For more episodes of Lifelong Learners, you can go to Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and you can go to YouTube and look up Lifelong Learners. Like, comment, and sharing my podcast helps me get my autism story out there. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel at Lifelong Learners Podcast. See you next week. Holly Tetreault.